So I'm delighted to welcome Judith Mabelis, who is a colleague from the SHINE team. Judith is a research fellow and has been working really hard on the SHINE online pupil mental health survey, which there was much discussion about in the previous case study. So lots of people really interested to hear more about this. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Judith, who will tell you all about it, and I'm anticipating lots of questions at the end of this. So over to you, Judith. Thank you.
Right, great. Yeah, thanks very much, Dawn. Yeah, so I'm really happy to talk to you today about the SHINE online pupil mental health survey, which we launched at the beginning of this month. So I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of it already, but I'd just like today to run through explain a little bit more about it, some of the measures that we use within the survey, and some things to consider before you administer it. And I'll also present some research, some data on mental health from the Health Behaviours in School-Aged Children study. So firstly, it's very much been developed as a resource for schools in response to feedback from SHINE schools. We provided you with, so a lot of you with school level reports last year from HBSC data, but we heard from you that you wanted to have data on more pupils and to have more in-depth data on mental health. So that's why we developed this online survey. So we've developed the survey, provided instructions and documents for schools on how to administer it. And in return, each school will receive a school level report, which has background information on mental health in young people, mental health measures used and how to interpret the data, school level data, so that's in figures and tables, and that's usually broken down by year group and gender, depending on the numbers. And we've also put together some challenge questions to guide discussion and interpretation of the data, because we did hear from some schools that they weren't always sure what to do once they got all this data. And we also provide a list of organisations for further information and help. So what does the survey measure? Well, it measures mental health. So we've decided to look at different aspects of mental health, such as subjective well-being, mental health problems, and positive mental health. So there's evidence that all these aspects contribute to mental health in young people and how they manage and function in everyday life. For example, subjective well-being, that's looking at happiness with different aspects of life, and mental health problems. So within this age group, the most prevalent things that we're looking at are low mood and depression and emotional and behavioural difficulties. And a positive mental health, that's sort of looking at how young people manage every day in their lives, the relationships they have, how they feel about themselves. And it's also the idea that these are aspects that can be changed and modified to promote better well-being. So the survey is very much a focus on developing and promoting good mental health. So this next slide just gives a kind of overview of the key measures that are asked about in the survey. So I won't read it all out, I'll just point out a few things. So we've got the name of the measure, what it measures, and whether it's in the primary or secondary survey. So we do have a survey for primary pupils, that's P6 and P7, and then a survey for secondary S1 to S6. So in terms of the mental health problems, obviously these measures aren't offering a clinical diagnosis. They're just able to indicate where some pupils might have particular difficulties in that area. If you look at the subjective well-being, that looks at happiness with 11 areas in life. That's been developed by the Children's Society in conjunction with young people. So it's very much things that young people think are important to their well-being and how they feel day to day. And that might be useful to look at in terms of seeing which areas where young people are maybe less satisfied. And for example, we often see that girls in particular aren't happy with their appearance. So that might help to kind of focus and try to do some work on that within the classroom, for example. And finally, the measures there of positive mental health. So that's looking at aspects which we know are associated with greater well-being and school engagement and things like that. So that might help you if you measure those to be able to see which areas you might want to focus on as a school, and so to be able to promote well-being. And they're the kind of key measures that we ask about in the survey, but we also ask some questions on school, like in school pressure and confidence, And within the secondary survey, we asked some questions on self-harm. Those are optional questions, so you as a school can decide whether to do that, and also on sleep quality. It's worth saying that within your Shine folder, you'll be able to access the questionnaire, so you can see in advance what questions young people will be asked. Just some things to consider. It's very much up to you to decide if you take part. We really hope you do, because we hope that you will find it something useful, really useful for your work. So it's up to you to decide which year groups participate and when. We are saying that it shouldn't be administered more than twice in an academic year. That's just to avoid kind of burdening the young people. It's worth bearing in mind that you need to allow 2 weeks for opt-outs. Obviously, it's an aggregate report, so we're not going to be identifying individuals who take part. So we're not able to issue reports if there are fewer than 14 pupils. In addition, small numbers might mean that we're not always able to provide those breakdowns by age and gender. So it's best to involve as many pupils as possible. So it's representative of your school community. We are aware that there are quite a few smaller schools out there, so this might be problematic. So there are options there where we can group year groups together, or you can join with other schools, cluster schools within your area, to have a kind of a shared report. So if you think that applies to you, then please get in touch with us, and we can help you with that. And just to consider that obviously it's quite in-depth, it's asking about mental health, so it might be worth doing some follow-up work with pupils after they complete this in the classroom. And yeah, basically tell us what you think. So obviously this is the first time that we're doing this within Shine, so we're really keen to hear from you how you find it, how useful it is. So that's all aspects such as the administration, the documentation, the report itself. Obviously really keen to hear how you use the data and any actions taken, because that would obviously give us the opportunity to also share with other schools within the network. And also if we think this is a good thing to carry on with, suggestions for topics for future surveys. And so we're just saying you should have all the instructions for this in your Shine folder. And now just moving on and thinking about sort of interpretation of some mental health data. So the next few slides are looking at data from the Health Behaviours in School-Aged Children study in Scotland. And we're looking at associations between low mood and different factors within the family, school and social media. So the measure of low mood within this is the WHO Wellbeing 5 Index, and that's also a measure that is asked in the Shine mental health surveys too. So this first slide is just looking at the prevalence of low mood. So as we can see, or hopefully you can see there, overall 37% of young people have low mood and 14% are at risk of depression. So on that slide there, we have the boys on the left-hand side and the girls on the right-hand side, and it's going up with age. And as we can see, the prevalence of low mood and depression increases with age, and it's particularly high amongst the 15-year-old girls. So that's about 58% of girls in that age group who have either low mood or at risk of depression. So obviously this is something that unfortunately is a part of our adolescents' lives. So that we then thought it'd be interesting to look at what factors are associated with low mood within adolescence. And so first of all, looking at family factors here. So you've got a list of different factors there. So we've got low family support, difficult communication with mother, communication with father, and whether they eat a daily meal with their family. And first thing to explain is that all those factors in bold, so the low family support, the difficult communication, is associated with low mood. So there are greater odds of reporting low mood. So for example, for the low family support, young people who say they have low family support are around 3.5 times more likely to report low mood than those young people who say they have high family support. And we see similar results for the difficult with communication. So those who say they have difficult communication with their mother or father are about 3.5 times more likely to report low mood. So if we move on to the next slide, this is looking at the association between school factors and low mood. And so there we look at, they've got different things. So we've got things about teacher support, student support, experience of bullying, feeling left out, and etc. And again, those factors highlighted in bold are associated with reporting low moods. So there are greater odds of reporting low mood if you experience that. So again, we see the importance of support, so from both teachers and students. So young people who say they have low teacher support or low student support are around 3, nearly 4 times more likely to report low mood. And again, there's an association between experiencing bullying twice a month and feeling left out and low mood. And again, now we also see that people who say they don't like school are also 4 times, nearly 5 times more likely to report low mood than those who say they like school a bit. Obviously, we don't know the line of the direction of association here, so it could be that school might not cause low mood, but low mood might make you not feel like you like school. So we don't know which way round that goes.
1 minute.
Okay, thanks. And just the next one is looking at social media and low mood. So we ask a series of questions about social media use. And what we see there is that so this is looking at how often they use social media, whether it interferes in their day-to-day life. And what we see here is that those young people who report problematic social media use around 2 times or 2.5 more times likely to report low mood than those who say they don't have problematic social media use. We also looked at intensive social media use, so that's being in touch with using social media a lot, how much you use it during a day. And what we see there is that there's no association between intensive social media use and low mood. There is an association between low mood and experience of cyberbullying. So this perhaps shows that social media may not necessarily influence low mood, not be especially associated, but it might be more about the experience that the young person has when they're using social media. And so just in summary, it's sort of underlining the importance of support and communication to a young person's mental health. There were similar results for all groups. There was no real differences between age and gender. Obviously, as I said before, the direction of association isn't always clear. And obviously there are many factors that influence a person's mental health beyond what's been covered here today. And thank you for your attention, and just some other thank yous there to other people that have been involved in helping us with this work.
Thank you very much, Judith, and well done for getting through that in the time when a huge piece of work that has been. So I'd like to throw the floor open to questions just now. If we have any questions that people would like to ask, please do put them in the Q&A box. We have one, there we go. How do we sign up? Well, I will be in touch with you, and if you have my email address, send me an email and I will send you all the documentation. We'll do that. And then a question from Luana Santa Rosa. By direction of association, do you mean causality?
No, I don't mean causality, no. Unfortunately, we can't say something causes something. All we can look at is that it's associated with it.
Mm-hmm. And then another question, what's the cost of the survey?
It's free. Mm-hmm. You just need to be a Shine member.
Yeah, so these are resources that we make available to the Shine network. Okay, and how long does it take to receive the report? I can maybe answer that one, or do you want to?
I don't mind.
No, actually, you answer.
You should receive it within a few weeks, basically. Mm-hmm. After completing, so you do. What will happen is that you'll need to return a response form to us. So once you've finished doing the survey within your school, you'll need to return a response form to Dawn, and that will trigger us to then generate a report. And that should be generally within a few weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And one from David Porteous here. Can you say a bit more about the challenge questions?
Okay, yep, sure. So they are basically some questions for teachers to look at with their school community, and just to ask, just trying to ask you to look at the data, reflect on the data, looking at things, whether anything surprises you, whether anything reinforces what you already know, trying to help you look at differences maybe between different groups or genders or year groups. So it's just basically to start sort of a discussion within your school community on the data that you have.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you very much. And I think that brings us to the end of the questions for the moment. There may be more popping up. There's one in the chat box there. I'll just bring that up. So this is to say, are there any significant differences in findings between HBSC and other recent surveys, so the Good Childhood Report or Bristol University report on COVID experiences?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and there's just a comment there from Susie Dick, from Arran High School, who's going to be presenting later, who's interested in the clusters, putting schools together to be able to put the data together. We're aware, obviously, of how many rural schools we have in Scotland, and that small numbers may be an issue. So using those clusters to share and get a representative piece of data from your context, from your area. And Susie's interested in having an island community, and she will talk about that later in her case study. Okay, so thank you very much, Judith, for sharing all that information with us. That was fantastic and a great piece of work. So what we are going to do now, and hopefully this will work, is to conduct a few polls just at the end of this session to get some feedback from the network as to where the interest lies for you in the work of SHINE. So I'm going to launch the first poll, and this is really just to get some feedback on the health topics, because as Judith said, we've obviously started with a mental health survey, but we're really interested in what schools see as the next most important topic that you would maybe like to have a resource of a survey from us. So some people have started already. So if you can see the polling on your screen, do tick the health topic that you would like us most to focus on for our next developments. So we have 59%, 60, we've got good coverage here. So I've got 4 questions that I'll be asking through polls, and we'll take some feedback from these. Okay, so I'm going to end polling on this first question just now, and I'm going to share the results. So interestingly, anxiety is coming up there as the topic that you would most like to focus on, you'd like us to focus on. So that's a great vindication of our program for today, as we started with the session on anxiety with Kathy and Gillian. So that's great. And obviously social media looking very high on there as well as pupils with additional support needs and social relationships. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to move on to the next poll now, which should move on to look at this time. We'd be really interested to get some feedback from you on the type of data that you're interested in, because we know that schools use a lot of different streams of data, and we're interested in whether schools find it more useful to have individual pupil personal data only, or whether you would prefer just anonymous aggregate data showing the trends according to age and gender only, whether you feel that both streams of data, individual and aggregate pupil data, are useful, or whether neither would be useful in your context. So we've had lots of discussions with schools about the use of the data, because obviously when you're working in a guidance department, you have the individuals in front of you, but then you have the sort of the wider year groups where you're working with your PSE curriculum and deciding what to focus on. So it's that individual versus the wider context. But Shine really works from a whole school approach and looking at the context that those individuals are in. So we're hitting about the sort of 80% mark, and that seems to have settled now. So thank you very much. Okay, that's a great answer. And it shows that schools are mostly interested in using both individual and aggregate pupil data. So one of the things that we found has come out of last year's networking event was schools getting together to share practice on how they use both together effectively. So that's something that we can focus on. Okay, I will stop sharing on that. And we're going to go on to the third question now, which is really about data sharing. And it's two questions. Firstly, just simply whether you feel confident about sharing wellbeing data with pupils. And then secondly, whether you feel confident about sharing wellbeing data with parents. And it's just a simple yes, no, or don't know, maybe because you haven't really had experience of doing that yet. Okay, so again, this is really just some feedback for us to look at how we can support the network with the use of the data. And again, there is no point us creating resources for you unless it's actually going to be useful to you in the context. So we really want to have a dialogue about what's useful. Okay, we're up over the 80% again. So let's end polling and share the results. So a resounding yes, that's 71% saying that they do feel confident about sharing wellbeing data with pupils. About 10% saying no and 19% saying don't know. So there's still a little bit of room for improvement there, maybe to support the sharing of the wellbeing data with pupils. So we can look into that. And this is an interesting one in the second question about feeling confident. So less confident about sharing wellbeing data with parents. So that's coming down from 71% to 53%. People feeling confident, that's 53% feel confident, but 22% not confident with that element, and 25% not sure, maybe just because that hasn't got to that stage in work yet. So that's an area that we could maybe look at supporting, is how to share data successfully with those two groups. Okay, and the next and final question is really about what do you find as members of Shine, what do you find the most useful aspect of our work? So obviously we've released data reports to members, which is either the school level data or regional data. So we'd like you to pick the top 3 things from this list, either the data reports, whether you'd find advice on sharing or using health and wellbeing data in schools, whether you'd find that most useful. The expert webinars that we do, 1 per term. We had 3 obviously last year. We had 1 on sleep, 1 on suicide and self-harm, and 1 on attachment difficulties. So that's another opportunity within the network to engage with health researchers. The networking events, obviously, we have our annual one, usually, preferably would be face-to-face, but obviously virtual today in the context. So research briefings and also research projects in schools. So this is the opportunity through Shine, because we're working in a health research environment, that you'll hear about projects that you could get involved in. So, okay. With people still voting at the moment, so that's just going up. I'll just wait for it to go over 80%. And that looks like we have everyone in. Okay, so sharing the results now. That's interesting. So the main resource that is of use at the moment is the data reports. So that would indicate then that the development of future surveys around different areas of health behaviours would be of interest. Coming in second to that is advice on sharing and using the health and wellbeing data in schools. So that's obviously backing up in the what we discovered in the other poll. And the expert webinars as well, they're very popular, that actual direct engagement with the health research community. So I'll be telling you more about our next webinar at the end of today. So, okay, thank you very much for taking part in the polling. I'm going to close down this session just now. And so we've had a fantastic morning with the webinar on anxiety, the 2 case studies, and obviously having an in-depth look at the mental health survey that Shine has launched recently. So you'll all be thoroughly exhausted and needing a coffee just now. So the good news is we're going to have a 15-minute coffee break, and then we will be back at 11 o'clock for the session on SCRAM. So we're going to hear about one of the health research projects, sleep, circadian rhythms and mental health in schools. So we will put our cameras off and our mics off for the moment, and we'll see you on the other side of the break. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Judith, for a great presentation.